This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. All right. Good evening and welcome to a special meeting of the Alpena Municipal Council. We'll start by opening our meeting and then I'll pass it to Mr. Scooby to open their meeting. Welcome virtually if you are. So to start that, we'll do the call order, please.
Here. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Here. Councilman Mitchell.
Here.
Councilman Noah.
Here.
And Mayor Walagora.
Here. Ordinarily, we would do the pledge, but we'll wait until you're go ahead when you do yours. The council will now approve the agenda and perhaps modifications. So I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Councilman Hess. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Councilman Mitchell.
Yes.
Councilman Noah.
Yes.
Mayor Walagora. Carried.
All right, thank you. And then I'll ask for modification to the agenda. And what we'd like to do is hold the presentation of the intergovernmental agreement for fire organizational and response services prior to public comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Councilman Mitchell. Councilman Noah.
Yes.
Mayor Walagora. And Councilman Hess. Carried.
All right, thank you. And just briefly before I turn this over to Mr. Scooby, is just to go over the format of the meeting in case there's any confusion. Is that giving more sense to see like we flow better questions and comments after the presentation. So the format of the meeting will be the presentations of Mr. Scooby and Chief Warbush. And then we'll open it up to public comment. If you are virtual, and hopefully this is all understandable with the echo, but if you are virtual, our IT department will turn on the ability for you to chat after the presentations. And what you'll need to do is put in a question mark indicating that you have a question or a comment, and then your name and address for our records. And what we'll do is we'll do the live questions and comments first. And so I'll go over just prior to that. I just so you know, we will ask that you give your name and address for our records prior to that. And with that, and we'll make some closing statements perhaps between the two of us. And we'll close for this evening. Just a reminder that we are not taking any action on this evening from our standpoint, I believe the townships as well. And we'll go over there. So I'll pass this to Nick.
Call this meeting in order. Try to come to Alpena. Roll call.
Trustee Huntley.
Here.
Trustee Lappin.
Here.
Clerk Palovich here. Treasurer Summers. Trustee Pearl.
Here.
Trustee Donald.
So,
Supervisor Skibby.
present. To the point of the adoption of the agenda, I would like to make an amendment to the agenda as presented, and that to draw public comment behind the purpose of the meeting of discussion of the intergovernmental agreement for fire department organizational and response services. Motion to approve the agenda. Well, Trustee Holder with the motion. Is there support, Trustee Dyke? It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Lappin. Yes. Clerk Palovich, yes. Trustee Pearl.
Yes.
Trustee Foley.
Yes.
Supervisor Skibby.
Yes. Now, in terms of our joint presentation, I think now we should probably Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So to get this public hearing started, everybody, I believe, has the handouts, which are going to also cover the slideshow that's represented on the screen behind us. I will introduce some of the initial screens. Okay. And then we'll just continue to move forward through the presentation. I thank everybody for showing up and bringing themselves here or their evening to give comment that will steer us in a positive direction. To move forward with this presentation, a concern that has been an issue at the township for numerous years is continuous rising costs. And that would really go into right to slide 3. And what we are seeing and have seen from 2008, and actually even longer than that, is that costs continue to rise. And as it is, we move forward with not only renewing the millage of 1 mil, but renewed with an additional 0.5 mil. That also partnered with a sunset millage of 0.65 mils for 5 years for equipment. Still have not solved the primary issues that we've historically been facing. As you see on slide 3, we have roughly $32,000 a year.
I'm on a call.
Of which our fire operation millage garners $514,000 off of our tax base, our SCD value. So that really, on an average, produces roughly $118,000 deficit to start and end our year. Next slide, please. Yeah. Our paid-on-call wages are budgeted at $60,000 a year. And so, and our budget's still sound with that, but our payroll is of primary concern, especially with the operational millage that is collected at $514,000. And on a monthly, and I believe, Michelle, you kind of extrapolated these numbers as well, as that on a 12-month fire department payroll, of which
It was from November 1st, 2019 through October 31st, 2020. 12-month roll.
So a 12-month rolling payroll expense, we're looking at an aggregate of $695,087 in payroll. And obviously that exceeds $514,000 that we bring in from the 1.5 mil operational budget, or the millage. That is, and let's be clear, this is when this encompasses and these numbers show employee costs, this isn't salaries alone. This is the cost to have an employee. Blue Cross, all of the ancillary benefits. By no means is this salary alone. This is the cost to have an employee. Thank you for the clarification. So on to the next slide, yes. We have, currently we have 6 full-time slots. We have one absent slot right now with 5 officers and our fire chief. One person is on a 24-hour station duty per day. Our paid-on-call firefighter and EMTs respond from home or from work throughout the township throughout the 24-hour period. Some of our paid-on-call firefighter EMTs transfer units from daytime at an hourly rate. And 2 personnel are required on all medical calls calls, which sometimes requires both full-time personnel because of the ambulance licensure. So we are a BLS plus B. Yes. Yes. Next slide, please. So continuing on, our township fire department ambulances are used as a first responder on medical emergencies and for non-emergency transfers. They do not transport patients. All transportation outside of the non-emergency transfer business is conducted by our ALS partners in the city and county paramedics. And then into the next slide, we get into the training hours that are required by EMS levels. As you see, we started out at an MFR at 70 hours, moving up to an EMT at 250 hours, an EMTS at 386 hours, and paramedics at the higher level are at 1,400 hours of training. Moving on, our full-time staffing is, as you see in this screen, show the locations of both the north and south side fire departments, where one person is stationed, guaranteed at all times. And the covering district that's represented by the immense landmass that is the township. So, thank you.
Hi, Bill Forbush, City Fire Chief, and I'm picking up where he left off. Thank you, Mr. Skibby. The deployment model for EMS resources in Alpena Township is indicated on this slide. It's kind of an interesting slide if you look at all the little graphics. So we had a medical emergency in north end of Alpena Township during the day when there aren't a lot of paid call personnel available. The response would be a city county ambulance with 2 paramedics and an ambulance from the north side, possibly with only 1. There may be paid on call people that changes that. As far as full-time staff, if there isn't a second paid on call person available to staff that unit, then the south heading needs to move to the north side. So you may have a fire truck and an ambulance and another ambulance. But what's really notable is that at that point, the whole south side is kind of uncovered. All that's left is whatever paid on calls have to be available. And that's a problem. I think that we can work through that in this program. So that brings us to the ask. Sometime ago, and I'll give you the exact timeline later in the presentation, we were contacted by administration in the township, and they were looking for the city to provide some assistance in the sustainability, financial sustainability of their program, and trying to come up with a win-win solution that will work in both communities. They asked, could we provide administrative, supervisory, response services? Yes, we can. Can we do a paid on call component? What we're really trying to do in this proposal, should it move forward, is to adopt the township's paid on call component into our family and continue with those same people. We're looking to hire up to 3 full-time township firefighters. That was developed on the basis that we have 3 full-time openings now. Our hiring requirement until very recently was paramedic, but in this case, we're willing to take on firefighter EMTs and actually pay to put them through paramedic school so that they can get up to the same level as the rest of the employees. We do have 3 openings that we've had for quite some time because of the paramedic shortage. Once we drop the EMT, we've got quite a few applicants, but we're holding 3 of those positions for township personnel if they want to come over. There is the possibility of township employees who may be over 50 years of age and therefore don't have 10 years left before they hit the 60 mandatory retirement in the city retirement system. So if we were to adopt one that fit in that criteria, the city has agreed to pay into a 401A system like the township's system so that they would get the same benefit that they would if they weren't in that situation. If they're below 50, they still have time to vest and they can go into our defined benefit pension system. The township would maintain the township stations, which would remain open for use of full-time and/or paid-on-call staff. The concept is to run the township stations as paid-on-call stations and empower the paid-on-call employees to respond to the station, pick up the truck, respond to the scene, operate the fire scene, independently of full-time personnel. However, at the same time, for dispatch, the full-time firefighters would be sent from headquarters as well, therefore meeting at the scene and working together from then on. The city would maintain the township, and that's a really neat opportunity that we have, because we have, in my personal biased opinion, the world's best truck mechanics at the city DPW. They maintain our whole fleet at a building department to department rate of about $35 an hour instead of $150 at the local shop. And they do a heck of a job keeping our city fleet in place. So that's something that we can do that will help to deal with costs and so forth on both sides. So the city will maintain the township trucks, but they will remain township trucks. They'll always be owned by the township and used primarily on the township stations. The city would also develop the necessary regulatory compliance programs so that we're in compliance with OSHA Part 74, MPHHS requirements, whatever else is necessary. What we bring to the table for the citizens is a full-time credentialed fire chief, a full-time credentialed deputy chief training officer, and an enhancement, to fire and EMS training programs. Our deputy chief training officer, Rob Edmonds, does a tremendous job on a full-time basis, 40 hours a week training programs, and has really enhanced the proficiency and the training level on city department, and we can do that in the township as well. We also have a full-time credentialed community risk reduction officer, and that's an interesting new term. They used to call it a fire marshal or a fire inspector, but the emphasis has changed in time. Where it used to be on inspection and enforcement, really now it's more on education and educating folks as to why they would want to comply with the fire codes and improve their safety in their business or their home. But at the same time, he's also certified as a fire inspector, a plan reviewer, and public education and fire investigation, so that he can handle all of those needs. And he's available full-time to expand the existing CRR program that's very successful in the city up to the township borders as well. Of course, we'll ensure ALS ambulance response to all medical emergencies, which is already in place in the county contract. In fact, we have been responding to every emergency and transporting every patient in Alpena County and in Alpena Township since 1980. We would add to it ALS rescue response to high acuity calls in the township. Like we do in the city, we send an ambulance, and we also send one or two guys out to rescue, which at this point is an echo unit, to provide assistance on cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, overdose, some of those high acuity calls. We would simply add the township to that so that full-time response would happen at the same time as the call response, responding directly from their homes. We also fire response with a minimum of one certified full-time fire officer, 3 certified full-time firefighters, in addition to the entire paid-on-call cadre. So the number of personnel on scene, it would be a lot easier to meet the NFPA standards. The cost of partnering with the city is in my opinion, quite modest. We're looking at $300,000 a year adjusted to the regional CPI, or 2%, whichever is lower, not higher. And it's capped at $400,000 a year. How that came about was that we wanted to leave some millage money there that could be utilized for the millage language for fire operations only and retained by the township until it's dispersed. So it could be used for anything else, but it would be used for other fire operations as the township board saw fit. And that leaves about $214,000 out of the millage. As you saw earlier in the slides, the current model is negative to the millage. To give you an idea of the city's financial gain, I have heard a lot of Facebook stuff, and some of it is how we're just in it for the money, and I just want to show you a little bit about the money. This is the Alpena Fire Department budget for this year. The largest section, or almost largest section, right here at $1.1 million is the city's portion of the general fund. The largest portion of $1.75 million is ambulance billing. Press Fields, $35,000, that's 1%. The ECHO program's $30,000, that's 1%. The county ambulance contract is 17%. At its current rate. And if this management contract were come to fruition, it would represent 7% of the city fire department budget. So it is not about the money. We don't need another 7%. That's not, we just have to make sure that, to be fair to our residents, so we are using city tax dollars to provide township services. So there has to be some consideration there. Personal financial gain for AFD administration. Some of my Facebook friends think I'm getting rich on this. Absolutely zero. Exactly the same additional compensation we got when we did the Prescott project. Now the city will continue our NICU and ALS Center facility program. At this point, we're down to emergency mobile intensive care, advanced life support transfers in most cases. During the day, we do non-emergency ALS facility, interfacility as needed. At night, on weekends, we only do the emergency ones so that we can maintain the appropriate staffing that we need for other emergency operations. Now, the city staffs a maximum of 9 and minimum of 8 personnel on duty at all times. Transfers are done, and again, the ALS only transfers are done with positions 7, 8, and 9. They are done with positions 1 through 6. So in no case is a transfer impacting the ability to field 3 ALS ambulances for the county immediately at any given time. So the minimum of 6 on-duty personnel is always available and is backfilled to maintain. So if there were 9 on duty and we needed 18, 2 at a time, 3 at a time, we'd keep calling people until we got whatever we needed to maintain that minimum of 4 at the station or 6 for ambulance calls. A full department page is done for all working structure fires, which typically brings back another whole shift, about 9 additional off-duty employees. The other night, some of the paid on-call personnel from Alpena Township were very passionate about their local BLS transfer program. And my plan at the time was not to do BLS transfers. It really isn't a core mission. We've done it for years and years and years, but only as a secondary kind of thing. But there's a lot of passion there. These folks want to do that. They want to serve their community and their meeting need. And so we will investigate the feasibility of using paid on-call personnel for scheduled needs and on-duty full-time personnel for unscheduled needs. How that would exactly work, I'm not sure yet. 2 days ago, I wasn't looking at doing that at all, but I hear you. You want to do that, you think it's very important. I don't want to take away anything in this process. I'm trying to help, so we'll look at that. We do not, however, we aren't planning, however, on doing BLS long distance services. Logistics are just too difficult. The combined department staffing pattern is shown on this slide. You'll go from 1 in the north and 1 in the south, who would be replaced primarily by paid on-call personnel. But you would have access to first alarm 4 more from the city, either one of those 2 locations, and up to 12 from the city in perfect situations. We have 9 on duty and then 3 admin. The 3 admin go to pretty much all fires on duty and off. So there will be plenty of help there. What's the distance? How far away is it? How does it affect response time? How far away is it? Is 2 miles from the station or a block from the border to the south station, which from the station in daytime heavy traffic is 4 minutes and 28 seconds traffic time. To the north station is 3.4 miles or 4.56 minutes in normal traffic. There are 3 traffic lights between those 2 that aren't as applicable if you were running emergent, but are still a factor. One of the keys to this proposal is that paid on-call firefighters will be empowered to respond to the station, drive the trucks, operate the apparatus, operate the pumps, even take command initially if there aren't career personnel on scene, and then be assisted and work side by side with a contingent of full-time personnel coming from headquarters. So it's a little bit different in the past. The career guys at the township have typically driven the trucks and operated the pumps. We're going to change that around a little bit if this goes through so that they operate more like a paid on-call fire department in other communities where they do the whole job. But we'll still have full-time support there to help and make that happen. In terms of EMS response times, that's really the only thing that we can measure because we haven't responded to a lot of fires in the township. But we can measure that the nationally accepted standard, according to Fitch and Associates in the Journal of EMS, is 8.59 seconds 90% of the time. If you look across EMS systems across the country, that's the standard 8 point, they call it 990, 8.59 seconds, 90% of the time. AFD ambulance responses in Alpena Township are averaging 8.21 miles over 8.21 minutes over a very wide area. As you know, the township is quite large, with 44% of the runs significantly faster than that. So if we assume that fire response time should be consistent with ambulance response times from the same locations, and augmenting those paid-on-call firefighters who are operating from township stations with township trucks coming from their homes, I would have to deduce that the response time should be similar, which means that national standard for EMS. For fire response, there are two standards that are applicable. One is NFPA 1720, which relies on on-call fire departments as opposed to full-time fire departments. And as you see at the bottom of that slide, in rural areas under 500 people per square mile, we need to field 6 personnel within 40 minutes, 80% of the time to meet NFPA for on-call standards. Of course, it's not all on-call. Some personnel are career. So NFPA 1710 covers career responses. And if you go all the way to the bottom for a lower medium hazard, which is most of what we respond to, you've got 8 minutes, 90% of the time to meet that standard in an all-career system. Now, here's one of the biggest questions that comes up is, what about ISO? And so we've heard from the Alpena agency, we've heard from Alpena agency, we've got everybody's best guess. Then we went to the actual expert. And Eric Abbott, who's the field representative for ISO mitigation for our area of Michigan, spent 2 days recalculating the city of Alpena and Alpena Township classification ratings to see what this proposal would do to the rate. Would it go up, would it go down, would it stay the same? What would the impact be? Now, there's more to it than just what you can calculate. Some of it's done in New Jersey, and obviously that wasn't done. But his best guess, based on years of experience doing these assessments, and he has assessed both of our departments several times, is that it would not change the ISO rating. He anticipates that it would not have a negative change starting the ISO rating. There's a slim possibility, not awesome, but a slim one, that it could improve the rating, but he absolutely does not expect it to worsen the rating. At the moment, the city is a class 5, the township is a 5/5Y, depending on water supply. The key to ISO is that the stations are not closing, they're just changing from one full-time to all paid-on-call staff. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that in Prescott Township, we went from a 10 to an 8B by simply opening the station with paid-on-call personnel. So career personnel were not necessary to get that increase in rating. This is an org chart of how we foresee the new combined department to look like. We have up to 3 additional full-time personnel that will spend their first while in paramedic school, most likely. They will be integrated onto the shifts and work side by side with everybody else. In 3 years, they will be paramedics. In the meantime, we will run basic medic on Alpha 2 and 3, not Alpha 1, but Alpha 2 and 3. The paid-on-call has this whole division off to the side here, and they now get the advantage of not only a chief as they have now, but also a deputy chief training officer, a CRR officer, and a tremendous training program that Chief Edmonds has put together for us. Some of the other questions that I've heard recently have to do with timeline, and there are, did you guys get copies of this thing? There are copies of this that you can have that I'll provide for you if you don't already have them. And the back slides of it are the timeline from my perspective. Mr. Skibby may have some additional things on the township side that I wasn't privy to. This really all started in, well, actually before, but it certainly started in 2007 with the Robson study. And the study are all addressed in this plan, although those started in the study did in some cases because it's a pretty old study. In 2017, the Township Fire Committee approached myself for information on consolidation potential. Is that something that we could look for? And when you look at these things, you look at the 3 C's. You look at cooperation and collaboration, and lastly, consolidation. So we've been working on the cooperation and collaboration part of it for a long time. I think we've done a really good job on both sides. I think we've done well. But we're just now considering the possibility of the consolidation end of it for financial reasons, really only. On the 6th of July, Supervisor Skibby contacted my boss, City Manager Smolinski, regarding shared services. The same day, I spoke with him and to her, and we brought the mayor into it, and council was briefed, and council confidential packet that there had been some discussion on the topic, that we were just holding the possibility. There were follow-up meetings and follow-up memos, the elected officials on the 13th. There was another meeting on August 20th, another one on September 8th. And at that point, we finally had a draft agreement through council or through legal counsel to the elected officials. On 9/16, the township responded to the last proposal we sent back and forth. There was a meeting on the 23rd. On October 21st, we went to discuss the approval timeline, which was originally intended to take place during October. We just couldn't quite get it finished in that amount of time, legal and so forth. On 10/27, we met with the township's attorney to clarify their position on the language and so forth. We met with Councilperson Johnson, or Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, I should say, with some questions on the 27th. Just very recently, on the 2nd of November, the confidential memo went to council with the final draft of the agreement. And I believe that the same thing happened on the township side of the township board. At that point was the last thing before it started to go public. Because at that point, you have to know that's what you want to do, and you're interested in it, you're willing to look further into it before you can move on. But in order to do anything that's going to affect people, we need to tell the people first. It would be rather not to do so. On the 5th, we had a briefing for both unions, followed by the city firefighters, followed by the township firefighters, both paid on call and career. And at that point, it went public with a bang. The release of the public packet happened the next day at noon on the 6th. Media got a hold of it then. And here we are on the 10th with the public joint meetings. At no time was there a violation of the Open Meetings Act. There were never meetings of either board with a quorum or secret meetings. The entire timeline that I'm aware of is on the slide. It's being provided to you in hard copy and on the slides as well. So in closing, there are just a couple of important notes. It's important to note that the township is requesting the city's assistance. This was not the city's idea. We are not trying to take over anybody. This came from the township to the city in response to a financial situation that they face. We believe that we can improve the level of service, the functionality of the fire and EMS protection for both communities. Even with the 1.5 operating millage, there's not enough funding to support payroll for 7 or even 6 full-time positions, much less additional operational needs. The city is willing to cooperate and even consolidate so long as, and these are very important things for the city, it doesn't reduce the level of service for city residents. It doesn't interfere with our ability to provide for the county ambulance agreement, which we've held for 40 years. It doesn't cost city dollars to provide township services. That's why there's a fee. And there is to some degree, at least an economic cover, so that we aren't spending city dollars to provide services outside the city. I think that's even legal and certainly isn't ethical. And that's why there's a charge. So that, in a nutshell, is the plan in all of its glory. At this point, I will turn it over to Mayor Walagora for public comment. Sir.
Mr. Skibby, did you have anything to add to the chief's presentation? Or?
The only thing would be that within the intergovernmental agreements, there are some that are also not listed. So within the packet that you got, the draft of the intergovernmental agreement itself, there's additional data points. One of the things that as a comment or question is, how would the township look at keeping a level of accountability? That in this draft of a document, there's a joint task force so that there is accountability on both sides. That accountability goes into even into perpetuity of what do new purchases look like for the township? Are those funds coming solely from the township? And those are all other additional points that are within the draft agreement before you. If you didn't, please pick one up at the door. But that would be my only additional comment that's outside the scope of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. What we want to do here, obviously, is be as productive as possible. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to either ask a question or present a comment. But I do have a couple of ground rules, if you will. As I noted before, we're going to take live comments and questions first, live here in the building, and then we'll shift to virtual. So I believe that that IT has now turned on the ability to chat. So if you have a question or a comment from the virtual world, please enter a question mark in your name and address. For our records, you do not have to enter the entire question unless we have trouble hearing you, and then we might be asked to do so. Obviously, I'm going to ask that everyone be professional and kind with your comments and questions. Keep your comments and questions relevant to the topic of tonight's meeting. And I'll have a couple of examples of that in a second. No duplicate questions or comments. What we want to do is be productive, and we want to make sure that we're not just duplicating what someone else asked. So again, hopefully everyone in the virtual world can hear the questions that are asked. We have a mic and a podium here for you to approach here in a second. We won't tolerate any personal attacks of anyone. And so some examples of questions and comments that aren't particularly relevant to tonight that we report to you, just not at this meeting. And they would be things that we picked up on over the course of the last couple of days. The timing of this rollout after the election is not relevant tonight. Whether the Open Meetings Act was violated is something for another meeting or another approach other than tonight. And questions about whether there's a need for the supervisor if this passes, those kind of things that we've kind of seen aren't really, this isn't really the place. What we want to know is what are your questions about the plan? If you have any concerns that weren't covered in the presentation about the plan. And then what we're going to do is just so, because it could go very long if there's a lot of questions and comments. So what we're going to do is we have, Chief disappeared, but I believe the Chief has Andy. Oh, he's right there. We're going to have a staff member write down the questions and present a type of a frequently asked question presentation on both of our websites with the answers to those questions. So we can save a little bit of time tonight, and some of them might take some research. We might not be ready to answer those questions tonight if you have something will take some research. So we are going to have answer those questions, because I don't want you to think that you're going to ask a question and we're not going to answer it tonight, and all of a sudden your presence here was irrelevant. That's not the case. We want to make sure that everything's logged properly. And Chief, you did talk to Andy. Okay, so we've got that covered. So I guess without anything further, we'll go ahead and start that. I believe the mic there is already turned on at the podium. So just be casual with coming up when you see that the last person is done. And please remember to state your name and address for our records. Thank you.
My name is Marie White. I live at 4165 Truckee Road, and I am concerned about this contract. First off, I'm not sure that the Alpena Township Board of Trustees were aware that Alpena Township started a fire department and it had no funding at all. All costs for the fire department came from within the general fund budget. It was only in latter years that we asked for millage to help for those costs, but there's still supposed to be money that comes out of the general fund. You know, and I'm not here to debate that. I'm more concerned about the fact that I had an incident at my home this past winter and was injured bad. Alpena Township was called, and Alpena Township really could have taken me, because all I did was rip my arm out. And Bruce was there within a few minutes. City ambulance came, and because they had to transport me, City ambulance took another 5 to 7 minutes. That is too long as far as I'm concerned. I know you're willing and I know you're able, but I don't think that you will provide the same level of service that our residents has got used to. And that when we voted our millages in, we voted it in to have Alpena Township Fire Department provide that service for us. If you're going to just continue it, I think maybe you ought to let the residents find, maybe there's some other alternatives. But I still think that we need to have our fire department and our emergency services. And if you wouldn't have if the township of Alpena wouldn't have dissolved the transporting system, they could have transported me from my home to the hospital, which didn't need an ambulance from the city of Alpena in my mind, because I was not dying or whatever. It was an emergency, but it was not a life-threatening emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I don't mean to interrupt Russ, but one thing I didn't mention is that we do have a 3-minute time, and our attorney will give you the nod when you have, like, I don't know, 30 seconds or 15 seconds left.
I'm going to say that before.
Just,
I'm Russ Reiner, I'm with the 350 Paramedic. And I have a few comments. They're not intended to offend anyone, but probably when I'm done, I'll probably have experience in offending most people in the room. I don't think I have to remind people on boards, and those of us who report to government know this. Primary duty of our government entities is to protect the citizens. But we also are obligated to be good fiduciaries with the funds entrusted to us and how we budget those funds. I knew from some time ago when I started to get involved in change system. I knew from some time ago as they started to pay attention to township budgets and that there was a problem with the fire department. There was a problem with the fire department financially, and it needed to be figured out. So this concept was in the back of my mind as I ran through the position I'm too soon to get. So I'm not opposed to this agreement if the big if for me is, can we guarantee the same or better coverage to the citizens of Alpena Township? And as Marie pointed out, I don't think we have an ambulance, I don't think we have a licensure to transport patients from an emergent call. We do have first responders. What troubles me about this agreement is that the first responders are now paid on call rather than sitting in a fire station on the north side and south side. So I'd like to consider, and I'd like to know, this is my question, I guess, is how much additional would it cost to put into this contract, having to pay the first responders in those fire stations to be first responders. Those 4 or 5 minutes that Bill talked about, they may meet a standard, a national standard, but they also are critical minutes in a heroin overdose, a stroke, a heart attack, someone that has gone into cardiac arrest. 4 minutes might be too long, 5 minutes might be too long. So if we can beat that time by not having those 4 or 5 minutes of the city's response out to the north side and south side of the township, I think it would be important to try to protect the citizens with something that could be worked into this contract for that purpose. Everything else, unfortunately, this is where I tell people, and actually don't disagree with you have to have some major changes. Township Fire Department or coverage, and I don't really think that ISO is going to be an issue. I don't know that I even agree with that we should be doing, I don't know what DSL and ASL transports are. That's a great terminology. But I'm not sure that it's either public deputy or necessary for the township fire department or ambulances to do those types of transfers. That's all I think.
My name is Pam Susan, and I live at 8554 US 23 South. I am very close to the Southern Township border. And as Mr. Bush claimed that the response time, he's saying 4 minutes. I'm also an 911 dispatcher, by the way. When you are in the middle of CPR, when your house is burning, 4 to 5 additional minutes for response time is not acceptable. It might be the standard, but in rural areas, it's going to cause major loss for people, whether it's life or their home. I'm concerned about staffing. I've been working when we can empty that city fire department in a matter of 20 minutes for 4 medical calls. He says, well, backfill. Maybe. You can't always get people to come in and backfill to have 4 sitting in that station. If that station's empty and a house has been bought on the south end of the county, township, catches fire, or someone's loved one is having a medical emergency, what's going to happen then? I would like answers to that. Also, what happens to the mutual aid agreements between the township and Maple Ridge Township, Sandwich Township? Those are little townships who often need additional help. Maple Ridge, they do a lot for Maple Ridge. Who's gonna, what happens to those agreements? What happens to the Thunder Bay Village? And it is right now, it's in Maple Ridge, but Maple Ridge can't get there fast enough, so the township covers it. What happens to that? I think that this, I don't know, it really concerns me. And I just wanted to bring those questions forward. We may not have answers tonight, but if someone could get some answers. I think these are things that a lot of people are thinking about. So thank you for your time.
I'm going to read, I already have a prepared statement. Some of it actually has been addressed already tonight. No, I'm sorry. Beverly Heights, 5864 Misery Road. Hello, and thank you all for the opportunity to learn more about this very important issue. My name, I already told you. I understand I have 3 minutes to comment and would like to present my top 3 questions first, as well as then my thoughts on the matter. I would also officially like to volunteer any time that you would like as a township president. If there's a township committee that is deemed the direction that this governing body would like to go to. My first concern is what evidence-based, validated current data is driving this proposal and how much time has been dedicated by each trustee in evaluating the data to become well informed on all possible ramifications on this matter. Is there a change in service or skill mix that will be experienced? And please clarify the mechanics of the on-call responders. What I mean by these is, number 1, where is the validated current data being used? It is my understanding that valid data is reproducible and current meaning usually recognized within 5 years. I have not seen where specific data has been utilized and presented publicly until tonight. Is there a chance in service, a change in service? Right now, I understand there is a guarantee of minimum 4 medical personnel that will be dispatched to my residents. If the township utilizes both stations, 2 paramedics and minimum 2 EMTs. If the township only utilizes Northside Station, 2 paramedics and 1 EMT, 3 total. Under the proposed agreement, exactly how many minimum medical personnel will be responding and what is the skill mix? I have elderly parents. is that it is being presented that only change will be in fire response. Typically, if I have a fire emergency, I am guaranteed minimum 2 responders for 2 fire apparatus response if both township stations are utilized. Under the new agreement, will this change service? The way the document reads, there is a response the city will provide, but it is a clear definition of minimum responders or minimum response time. Please clarify the mechanics of the on-call responders. In my industry, on-call means you're paid a specific amount of money to be available to respond to an area within 20 to 30 minutes. It is a guarantee that somebody is available and they will respond. I believe the on-call responders, as referenced in the draft document, are actually more of a paid per call, not that they are guaranteed to respond at all. And that is a concern for me. That is a change in service as a township payer. Thank you for your time.
Christina Township, 4666 Long Lake Road. Alpena Township has bought 2 ambulances, and if you decide tonight to merge, what is going to happen to our rigs? Sell our rigs to the city for $1, like things have been done in the past. Our township fire department was doing great with making a profit with long distance transfers, local transfers, etc. Then you guys pulled the long distance transfers from the fire department township. Those were BLS transfers. And now the city can't even guarantee BLS. Now you have minimized or changed the long distance transfers that the township can do into a 30-mile radius. We used to be able to go to U of M or Traverse City in that and make a profit, and now you're taking that from the township. So now they're making less money. So, yeah. I understand that the city had 2 to 3 openings in the station for a while, but you can't find anyone to apply, so therefore you're making the township people be a part of the city that is going to, I don't know, not do so great. As a township resident, I want to keep the fire department as I feel we need it. When there is a fire, I know those men and women are dedicated and quick to respond. I have watched how hard these men and women have worked. They have saved homes because of their ability to be on scene fast. They have saved lives because there's a 24-hour lieutenant or captain at the station at all times. They can be in the rig and to the scene within a few minutes, not 10 minutes or longer, because they have to drive all the way across town. If a CPR has been called out, the township guys at the station get to the scene so fast, they have saved lives. The personnel that they bring with them, that stand behind them, are extremely important too. The city rigs get to the scenes too, but minutes later. That can be a difference between life and death. If I was in that situation, I would want someone to be there with every equipment possible to save me and my family members' lives. Now, as a firefighter's wife, these men and women of our department are our family, friend, and heroes. My husband has been on the department for 11 years. He has worked 40 hours a week and volunteers his time. Volunteers his time to our community. He loves it. He has never complained about it. He has talked about the merge, and you pulled the floor out from underneath those men and women. Like I said, my husband works 40 plus hours a week, plus then he volunteers his time. And the trainings that are for the township are first and third Wednesday of the month. My husband can't make the trainings that the city does because they have it all throughout the day. What about the cadet program? Not a lot of people know about the cadet program. The township recruits high school students to train them to be a firefighter. They hope that one day they will want to be a firefighter for our As far as I know, the city has no program like that. Why, okay. I ask that you table this until a community can be formed with the interested parties to be able to formulate a 6-month to 1 year to 2-year plan to initiate changes, and then to be able to have a public input on these situations for the greater good of the community. And why is this being rushed?
Can there be some kind of a staging spot for next people up? So there can be more, there's time.
The question from the back was whether there's a staging spot. Well, that would be fine. And what we want to do is just make sure that everyone keeps an acceptable distance. But just to know who's coming up next, I guess if we want to start, it's probably a good idea to start forming a line so we're not just racing from our chairs for the next person. It's a good point, and I'm fine with that. If we want to start a line of next people, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name's Valerie Urban, 2685 Milton Road. First of all, I'm concerned that we put a price on these men and women that volunteer their time to save lives, save homes. I don't see that you can put a price on that. They do this because this is what they want to do. And to say that they are not important, to me, is unacceptable. I live 5 minutes from the North Side Fire Station, but I live in an older home. And by the time calls are made, my home might be fully engulfed. So I'm just supposed to accept that? I don't think so. Also, my question is, the millage. I voted for the millage because I knew how important it was. I pay taxes on that millage. So when that millage is done and the city needs them to pass the millage, are the township voters also going to be able to vote on that, or is that just a city vote? I don't think that's acceptable. Because you're still playing with our lives, our homes. So it might not be an answer that you have tonight, but those are some of my concerns. Mr. Skippy, I know this is not related. Can you turn the street light back on, Woodward Avenue and Hamilton Road, please?
Hi, Tammy Thompson, 2448 Diamond Drive. Thank you guys all for your service. I believe that the fire department is a service. It's not a business. Like a school, a library, we pay taxes for this service. So my question is, what alternative services will be given that you'll be saving the general funds and the fire department funds with, other than life-saving services that seem to be very important to our community? After this 3-year contract, can the contract be raised also and the cost? And then, okay, one more point. I guess if you were at home and you were choking, would you want somebody to come in 2 minutes, or do you want to wait 5 to 10 minutes for them to come and help you? Also, in 2007, I believe, wasn't there a feasibility study done on our township that said that the fire department was needed? And if so, did you guys have a new feasibility study done that said that it wasn't needed anymore? Thank you.
Hello, my
just got an injury. I live at 390 South Norman, Alpena. My stuff might come around, but hopefully I'll hit it all in 3 minutes. So my first and largest concern is the theory versus the reality of the response to all areas of the township, because that's what we're talking about, and to some extent, responses within the city of Alpena. So the scenarios, there's so many scenarios that you can play out that don't bode well and don't meet what I would consider an acceptable criteria or response time for severe medical emergencies or fire, getting an initial fire attack, or establishing an airway in a patient who's having trouble breathing. National standards are great, and stuff that's done in other areas is great, but what we're talking about is what's separate consulting currently is not really the, well, I think what's being missed is the service to Alpena Township residents, and by default, the city residents as well. Or if you have a response to a far end of the city of Alpena Township, and then you have 2 structure fires, auto accident, medical emergency, nobody's getting good service because you're splitting and you're splitting and you're splitting, and then you're expecting you can call back plenty of people. You can call back people from other municipalities, jurisdictions, so on and so forth. But the initial attack is what my greatest concern is. My other concern is I would call it the alleged financial problems. So most of my experience has been that most government agencies run their entire budget off of their job. And you do millages when there's something that needs to be a supplement and not necessarily a long-term fix. Where if you wanted to establish the millage to be the catch-all and run-all for all your operations for, in this case, the fire department, you should take the time to establish it, find out what's going to work the best, ask the voters for approval, and see what is going to be in the best interest of the community while still maintaining an acceptable level of service. There was I'm not necessarily about fluff. There's been mentioned about certified and standard people and credentialed. Your township fire department has all those people. That's not a bonus in service. In my estimation, and I plan to call the mayor sometime today and talk to him if he had time for me. The only thing I can see might be a little narrow-minded, possibly. This is not a win-win for either. There's a negligible financial benefit. If there's even a benefit, I think time will show that's going to cost more and it's going to be less effective. You'll have to build up the system to make it operate better than it costs more. It's also a misnomer that the stations are not closing. Although technically the word closed is correct, it's not going to be closed, but it might as well be closed. People responding from home, or if they're available, that's it. Be more effective. I don't think that you're doing your vehicle maintenance for free. That's going to be an additional cost to the township. I don't see any panic in the previous 6, 12, whatever months about a financial desperation. If you were to take your shortfalls and divide by households, population in the township, I'm sure you'll find it be even more negligible need to recover costs or find some other way.
Joe, I got 608 again. Let's everybody take note of how long 3 minutes is. Everybody realize how long 3 minutes is? I mean, imagine we just made a phone call to 911 and, well, Brent's not anymore. It's an emergency. Okay, well, we're on the phone with 911. We're describing the woman what the issue is. She's computing what she's going to do, what call she's going to make, who she's going to call, what she's going to send. Those are extra minutes. You put up there on your slide that there's 4 minutes or whatever you're within what's appropriate. 4 minutes to get from the Alpena city station over to either the north or south. And then how long does it take those people to get into the vehicles that they have to take to go to the emergency to the emergency den? So you've got the 911 call that we started with. Takes us going 1 minute, 1.5, 2 minutes to decide what she's doing, who she's calling, what's going on here. And then we have a little trip from here to over there to get the equipment to go do whatever work we have to do. These are extra minutes that are added to this emergency. This is a count that's hourly. Feel free to answer my questions as I ask them. How is this extra time going to be taken care of? How is this going to make things better? How can it minutely make the system better? How can it minutely make ISOs lower? It doesn't compute. When the first slide that you had up there was firemen, right? $100,000 a year. How much an employee costs? I'm a union sheet metal worker. I get paid $30 an hour. My total package is $50 an hour. I understand the cost of an employee, but as employees, it seems to me it's like they must pay something out of their paycheck to add to their benefits or anything like that. I mean, I know it's not free for me to have these benefits. It comes out of them. What's the additional bill that we need to keep the people that we have? I mean, we have a bill now, but what's the additional bills that we need to ask for taxpayers to make what we do have work, rather than trying to make this combined system? Those are my questions. Sorry you couldn't see that fast. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to point out just briefly and that we understand that there's a response time concern, but just as a matter of being productive and saving some time, please keep your questions and comments new, because we are taking notes. So notice that just about everybody is. So the response time, we kind of get that, so we can keep on pace. Thank you.
I did use 3 minutes.
Mitigation back in 1244 Long Rapids Road. I understand, working in the medical field, that the need to kind of streamline our services is necessary, you know, for budget flows. We all deserve that service that we can get for the dollar. And my main thing is, so as a government body, where is your task force that looked into this before you drafted an agreement? Where is the people that you looked to and said, hey, how can we fix this big overwhelming feature here? You know, how do we fix this internally before we start dwindling it outside to outside people? As a township resident, I feel like our government as a township is saying, hey, you voted us in, so this is what we're going to do for you. Instead of saying, hey, we have a problem. We'd like to address it. We'd like concerned citizens to come in and sit on this committee and help us figure out what the best route is. Instead of being fed an agreement saying this is where we're going. Right? If it possibly. If this is such a good agreement, why do the parties involved feel the need a 10-year contract So that when you guys are on this board, it just doesn't dissolve and go away. Those are the end of my questions. Thank you.
Dave Robbins, 216 Richardson Street, City of Alpena. 112 East Wisner Street, City of Alpena, and 7750 North Wind Shores in Township, Alpena. And I appreciate the time, but I would respectfully request as much time as my counterpart. I will try to make this brief. But there is so much I heard tonight. I have so many questions. Okay. So, number one, the $632,000 for payroll. What I do stipulated a time period that was great. Okay. Is this a one-time deal or is this been consistent throughout the years?
I would have to go back and look. I would ask you to get like an annual.
Okay, I have to apologize to both the council and the board because I know my body weight back there was pretty mischievous, that when I'm getting skewered with a hot poker, I react. So, okay, I just want people to know, I highly question the $632,000 as an ongoing problem. I do not dispute in any way that this specific time period.
It includes fringe benefits.
I realize that you guys have to realize that, when we go through the budget process, I'm looking at, I go back through the last 15 years of comparison, and the most that our personnel budget for the full-time officers has ever been winged at is $325,000. And I understand that with COVID and overtime and quarantines and losing employees, we had a horrific overtime problem when this arose. But I think to try to use that one little snapshot of time in the budget to sell to the public, we have this horrific budget problem at the department. I'm not on board with that. I heard a lot of comments about our part-time being empowered. I'd like a definition of that. What's going on with my part-time people that they need to be empowered, or are they feeling neglected, or they don't get to drive a truck enough, fight enough fire? Please define that for me. Okay, so here we go down the list really quick. I want people to know that there's a real clear definition between facts and perception. I think there was a lot of perception indicated in here tonight. I'll start one. On my part, no indication at all from our prior annual audits that the department or the township was in any way financial problem or was brought to my attention other than during the COVID problem. 2, request for financial analysis has been requested but not completed. So if it's not, I'm going to shoot for that. So if the analysis isn't completed, we don't know where this horrific coverage is, how have we already arrived at a written offer agreement? Okay, and that brings me to my next point. Civics was one of my favorite things in high school. So I'm wondering, you guys made a point to say that these meetings were all above board and open meeting and everything. So I'm sure somebody could produce for me the minutes of those meetings and where this was openly discussed with the entire board and there was a board action taken. Because again, I question, how can we arrive at an agreement like this without a board action? I've not been advised of any budget shortfalls or directed to cut under the assumption that the department would close. There was any type of trouble other than several years ago at a then fire committee meeting when I was told we needed to look at some alternatives. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to give Dave a couple more questions. So I'm going to make a couple of comments first. That I'm just going to suggest that you be as courteous as possible and ask your questions or give your comments maybe without as much additional comments as you can. I want to stay professional, Dave, and I understand where you're coming from. So it's fine. Everybody else will give you a little bit more time, but if you could stay relevant, the suggestions I made as far as what topics were relevant to this meeting stand for you as well. So if you could just stay relevant with the plan that we rolled out, I appreciate it. And I apologize, man, but when somebody tells me that part of the response time day and a half, and I told you it's rated 2.5, that's relevant. Okay, this board undertook this action with no input from the firefighters, their management, meaning their officers, or the administration, meaning myself. I've never heard any input or discussion from the fire committee, nor any board minutes. And as of tonight, again, I would stress there was no board action, so how did this agreement come about? As far as the history, we all know about the Raymond Robinson report that was generated in 2007, which was the first attempt to know the apartment, so that's one. It was attempted again in 2012, was it not, Marie?
Yes.
So this is the third try. And again, it was such a great idea, it wasn't implemented the first few times. Getting to the Raymond Robinson report, if you look at page 1-3, C1, you'll see where Raymond Robinson stated, if we want to use them as a reference, that the Township Fire Department is a relatively cost-efficient operation. Raymond Robinson also made some very specific suggestions on things that needed to be corrected before anything like this was attempted. The Township did this, and I want to point some of those out. So, item 2, they suggested a modified administration because at the time there were 6 captains, there was no chief, there was no lieutenant, so they were concerned. They were concerned about incident command. The Township hired a chief, and we instituted a command structure where we now have openings for chief, 3 captains, 3 lieutenants. Item 3, I'll skip over that. I'll also skip over the discussion of the township building a new station for the city on the 32 corridor, as we discussed the other night. Item 5, the purchase of the 2 new ambulances. I caught a little bit of heat about that, but that was at the suggestion of the Raymond Robinson report. And we also operated under state guidelines. So when we wanted to improve service to our community and step up BLS, we had to follow the rules. So that's where the ambulances came in. So, again, as Mr. Ginter pointed out, I heard a lot about certified and credentialed, just so everyone knows. I am a certified inspector, arson investigator, and fire instructor. Another thing that Raymond Robinson pointed out is the township should adopt a fire code. The township adopted the IFC 2015, which is the same one the city operates under. Section D lists at least 6 items that need to be resolved prior to consolidation, which have been discussed, let alone resolved. But I heard tonight the approach suggests that tonight is simply place
my employees under the umbrella of city management, whose approach so far has been nothing but a maybe promise of basic employment and take it or leave it. We haven't resolved rank other than you won't have it. We haven't resolved the integrated administration structure other than it's not going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. Another question I had is when I talk with people, they always seem to put the township in the we're smaller than the city category, right? And if you look at the demographics, population-wise, we're only maybe 150, 200 people off. We're about 125 square miles. We're doing a budget load. And I think everybody also realizes that the corridor on 32, the township is growing. Okay. So there's a juxtaposition here where there is a possibility in the near future that we may actually be bigger than the city. Item 11, if you look at that, the restated some concern, and I know the response times are kind of irritating you, but in Raymond Robinson's report, they looked at 7 items, and we vested the city in 6 out of 7 for those response times. Page 4, paragraph 3, joint command structure was recommended. I didn't see that. It was we're giving everything to the city again. Yeah, now I think I can give just a second here. Oh, the benefit of fire prevention programming and stuff the city would provide us is discuss the township has very little in the way of fire prevention programs. I'm reading Raymond Robinson. In contrast, the city has a comprehensive business inspection program, a substantial site plan review process, and fire pre-plans for most local businesses. I want to remind you who was fire marshal at the time this report was written. Another incremental step for fire consolidation and service parity, the township should place greater emphasis on fire prevention programs. Okay. Pardon me, I'm sorry. Township should first adopt a fire ordinance. We did this. Ideally, the same model will be utilized by the city. We did that. Number 2, one or more of the ATFE's fire personnel should gain certification as a fire inspector. They're 2-week course. I told us since the year 1999. Number 3, township should request the fire marshal's assistance in establishing a business inspection model and the city program. I won't repeat what I just said. The inspection should be performed by on-duty captains that are trained for this purpose. As an initial target, ATFE could strive to inspect 50 to 100 of the businesses each calendar year. Again, that's easy enough for the township to accomplish that I need to go in that direction. 5, cities concurrent townships use the city fire marshal for all commercial site plan reviews and arson investigations. I think I already pointed out. Township has not one but 2 arson investigators certified in intervention. So, so my point here is I've had since 2007. I've read it many times, and I listened to what was presented tonight, and all I see from a practical standpoint from a department head's position is right now this is an opportunity for us to maybe fix a personal problem that the city has. Number 2, I want to echo her, not number 2, but going on, I want to what I've heard another person saying is that our department is part of infrastructure, it's not a business. I think there are many in my position that will agree with the quickest way to kill the fire department is to treat it like a business, which I feel has been done here. So, and I also, for my board, I was reading through the policy and procedure manual today. specifically the ethics, transparency part. And we were so transparent about this agreement that's already been authored with simple means of both signatures. Why was the other day the first time the department, in fact, myself, or people in this audience, why is it the first time they ever heard about it? I don't, transparency is something you do, it's not a word you throw out. This was not by any means transparent. Okay? So, my apologies, but sounded just a little bit contrite, but my circumstances the other night, I was called into my fire department. My men were shut down. We basically were given the terms of our surrender. And I was told that I probably would no longer have a job after January 4th. And to allow the people that orchestrated and offered that to let me know about it. From a personnel committee standpoint, the people that hired me and I worked for, I personally was a little bit insulted. I'm sorry, but this is not the way to do business. And also, I had a couple of people at our party sarcastically give me bereavement for the insubordination charges that are to be brought against me fairly quickly, but it's kind of sarcastic. But just so you all should know, as long as my fire department is in jeopardy, between now and every time you pull the plug, I ain't misbehaving, being insubordinate. I'm fighting for you guys.
How's it going? My name is David Nelson. I live at 2448 Diamond Drive. First and foremost, sorry, I'm going to thank everybody. And before I get started, I want to say that I have the utmost respect for everybody in this room. First, I agree completely with the collaboration between the two of you. I absolutely think it's necessary for our community to get involved together. Unfortunately, I disagree with the timing of this, not because of the elections, not because of that, but because this is something that needs to continue with growth in time. We need to address all of the issues before this is taken anywhere. Number one, I mean, Chief Warbush explains that this is, the disturbance will be better. But to clarify, what we're doing is we're giving up, as a taxpayer, I'm giving up a full-time department with paid on-call component and a mutual aid agreement in place with the city at this time for a mutual aid agreement with the city in a paid on-call department. I mean, that's the reality of what this agreement is at its core. And I really behoove you guys to look at this and look at every aspect of it before you go forward with this. Number two, the feasibility of this, if we look at the money, as far as budget, we all know that the money grows year after year. Our salaries are going to grow. You're going to incur costs for Medicaid, Social Security. You're going to get that. So if our costs are growing, the city's costs are growing. In order for the city to be able to do this, those costs are going to continue to rise. So where in the future are we taking into account the fact that the city is going to have to charge us more in the future? And it's not that they're trying to make money, but the fact that their costs are rising as well. So where is that taken into account in this? Because other than the 304 to 400,000 category, there's no account for that. Not to mention the long-term feasibility if this were to fall through. I mean, heaven forbid, nobody wants that. But where do we stand as a taxpayer if this agreement falls out? Sure, we have the trucks. But, I mean, at this point, what do the trucks do us if we don't have the personnel? And you can't just start from scratch. You can't. I mean, it's, the feasibility of that is tough. So I guess that's where I really ask that you guys take the time to get together on these issues and look to the future, because long term, you need to make this work. Not just for the department, not for the township, for the city, but the entire community, because as a community, we do need this collaboration. But it has to be done the right way before you sign off on it. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Kenneth Jacob II, 2276 Maple Grove. So mathematically, it's very tough to understand how by eliminating 3 of the township firefighters and merging with the city, that roughly probably under 10 square miles of service for the city is going to be expanded to probably about 120 miles, and you're going to have equivalent service. So mathematically, it's very tough to explain that equivalent service will be given to the township personnel. Okay. Second, I believe the millage was passed in 2019, correct? 18? Did we not know there was a shortfall in the budget in 2018 to not put the full funding required in the millage?
Keep going.
Okay. Do we not know that though? Okay. So the other thing is, and it doesn't affect me as much because I'm not part of the city water, but what is the impact of the water litigation between the city and the township in the overall budget? Because you're talking about 118,000 shortfall. Looking at the professional fees line and what I could find on the budget, it showed about $290,000 of professional fees. So are we attacking an issue that seems easy by going after the fire department when there might be other opportunities in the budget to save the money? And from the standpoint of looking at fully loaded labor costs, it is also difficult to say eliminating 3 firefighters is the equivalent to $118,000 in savings. Right, so I think that's another thing that needs to be looked at, is that is what is being eliminated from the township aspect of the fire. But I would think that a firefighter in itself, 3 would be substantially more cost reduction than that. That's what you're doing. Right, I think, Matt, you mentioned the professionalism of this discussion, which is important, right? But you guys are elected officials, and this is where I have trouble with the timing of this type of event, because it looks like there have been years planning this. We literally get through an election, and 2 days following the election, this gets slid in, which seems very unprofessional. So that, I think, is where a lot of people have an issue with this. Because we elect people to represent us, and it kind of doesn't pass the sniff test. It seems a little dirty. Okay, so that's the extent of my questions. So I appreciate your time. Please look at that perspective as well.
My name is John Clemens. I live at 2414 House Drive, township property owner, as well as one of the township fire officers, the 2 departments. My first reaction to the news of this opaque plan was anger and betrayal. This whole venture, contrary popular being presented to us, I fear this merger will end badly for the residents of the township. The whole venture is based off of the fire department roster, which has 28 names on it. What's not been considered is that most of the work is being done by the 5 full-time officers and about 6 of the on-call, all of whom have other jobs. A standard 40-hour week consumes 2,080 hours per year. There are several in our ranks of the full-time who average over 4,000 hours a year. We don't interrupt birthday parties, Christmas, Thanksgiving, or leave our spouses and families at grocery stores, restaurants, because we want to. We respond out of service for our community and support for the others on our department. Our families understand and support our efforts. While Chief Forbush has stated there will be more personnel available for calls, I do not believe this will be the case. City Fire is already stretched by covering the entire county for medical calls, parts of Crestfield, which was not mentioned, long distance transfers. They're able to be stretched because they have the township event. In the township this year, we have had at least 156, 1,938 calls where only full-time have responded. That averages over 14 calls a month, with only from the 5 full-time personnel responding. That's 156 calls. Residents would have to wait a minimum of about 4 or 5 minutes to get help from the city for health, a medical emergency. It's not too late. Do not proceed with this merger.
Hello, my name is Chris Benedict. I live at 820 South 3rd Avenue in Alpena. I'm coming before you today just to share some of my perspective. My son Matthew was one of the first cadet programs and cadet members who went through the township program. And I saw in him a passion for firefighting and a future that he is very excited about. So I came to this meeting not really having an idea of how I felt about it, just wanting to hear what's going on. But I had some concerns as I listened to it, in that I never got an idea that other alternatives were looked at. If there's a budget issue, if there's other issues that need to be addressed, I never saw that there were other considerations of things that could be considered. Became real concerned when I hear Chief Robbins wasn't included in a lot of the discussions. The people who know the most about the organization not being part of the conversation caused me some concern. I think everybody here would be looking for a win-win situation. And just as objective as I can be, I see that there's a lot of people in this room that doesn't feel that this outcome is going to be win-win. I feel a lot of people, if this goes through, they're going to feel that they've lost something. They've lost protection of that short response time that they see in the township. And I feel like the opportunity of really looking at all the alternatives has not been considered. Thank you.
Tim Muggy, 1407 Burncliffe. I've been on this fire department for 30 years almost. I'm representing the part-time firefighters. We had a meeting the other day, and these guys feel betrayed. They're hurt. But they've got the guts to keep going. And I hope the board realizes that. We don't want to quit.
but we feel betrayed. We don't want to merge. I've got bullet points here I'm going to read, but I'm not going to do it. I've got one question. I've been on this township for, I'm not sure for sure how long. Mr. Skibby, Mr. Lyman, Chief, and I, a couple other guys. This has been going on since 2017. Why? My question is why have we been not made aware of this situation? That's what we're there to discuss. And not a word has been said. Thank you. I'm sorry. If you're comfortable with closing your mouth, or leading it a little bit.
I'm sorry. Christina Gold, 5332 West Elm. But with that, I've been sitting back there, just watching everything that's going on. I can't believe you guys would disband the fire department. I have had it at my house for probably 4 or 5 times. And we've been there before. Do not, I will fight this. Do not disband the fire. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Cakeless. I live at 490 Partridge Avenue in Alpena. I have 2 questions. Number 1, may I have permission to speak freely? Very well. My question for you is, and this is for the city, what will you do if you do not have enough data to call firefighters to respond, who continue on when this merger happens? So that's my one question for you. My statement is, I will not dismantle my fire department, so I will not resign tonight, but I've made my decision. If you would not campaign on this issue and put your political careers on the line for this, I will no longer put my life on the line for you. I will resign when you vote on this agreement.
Okay, Steve, do we have one more? I just want to clarify again. I get it. I think we get it. About the issues of transparency and time responses. I just honestly just want to keep this productive, and moving. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time for coming out here. But please don't duplicate and stay productive. Thank you.
I can guarantee mine is a little different. My name is Eileen Pottinger. My address is 2604 Michigan. I think I won the award for furthest drive. I represent the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union and represent both Alpena Township and Alpena Firefighters Unions. We ask that we understand that you won't be voting on this tonight, but we do ask you to table this proposal so as to allow both unions to research this proposal more thoroughly. Although there might not have been any violations of the Open Meetings Act, there were several times in the slides that you had, there were multiple confidential memos and private meetings held. And we just asked, why has there not been input earlier from both the fire units? They are the workers. The part-time firefighters are the workers. They should have had input. I think that would have caused a lot of stopping of the suspicion and confusion if there were just an open conversation. Especially when they worked so diligently this summer. I know I came up this summer for your meeting with the millage, the EMS So we just ask that there's more open communication. Not that anybody's necessarily for or against, just to have open communication to understand what's going on. Once again, we ask you to table this proposal to work together with the unions to find the best solution for both the Alpena and Alpena Township citizens and their constituents, and also the firefighters should protect them. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, the virtual world is.
Okay, Kevin, go ahead.
Yes. My name is Kevin Reamer. I live at 4080 Long Lake Road in Alpena Township. I was a Alpena Township full-time firefighter for 23 years, retiring in 16. Without having full-time personnel in that station, it's going to jeopardize the citizens of Alpena Township. When I was a captain at the township, there was many a times where we were the first ones on scene. We put a slowdown on fire. It was a structure fire until our part page could arrive. There was times where we were on medicals that we actually saved people because we were the first ones there. We started CPR. We started the emergency services that we needed to. Also, I don't think the Alpena Township Board or the City Council have done their history and looked into this. Back in roughly the 1960s, Alpena Township went and they had north side, south side, and they were having problems with money, and they decided to close south side, keep north side open. The next day, south side would be open, north side would be closed. Well, the day that they decided to close the south side fire station, Shabbat's Collision caught fire. The trucks had to respond from out of the north side station. And mind you, there was full-time personnel in that station at that time. When they arrived on scene, that building was totally involved and they lost everything. That almost cost the township itself big money because people were mad. And now we want to go and take and put part pays or volunteers, whatever, and let them respond. It just does not make sense at all. I think that township board needs to look at the history and the things of that department. The money issues have always been there. They were there the day that I was hired, and they were there the day that I left. That department ran out of the general fund for years and years. Now all of a sudden, it's a big issue. And I agree with one of the people that came up and spoke. It's kind of really funny that this didn't come out before the election. Now that the election's over, it comes out.
I'm just going to ask you to stay on task, and I'm going to. It's not relevant for tonight. What we're doing is we're taking input on the plan, and so the. But I do need to ask you to restate your name and address for us. We didn't catch it at the beginning, please.
My name is Kevin Reamer. I live at 4080 Long Lake Road in Alpena Township. I was a full-time firefighter for Alpena Township for 23 years.
Thank you.
You go to the next. Okay, it seems we only had one request on the, from the virtual world, and that was Kevin. You could read that. Sorry, this thing picks up everything, including my walking. Okay, as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, what we're going to do, what the city is required to do, because this was a proposal, we're not going to take action on it this evening, but we do have to take action just to follow Anna's rules. So I'm going to ask for a motion to postpone the decision of this plan from council.
One comment, Mr. Mayor, I mean, or, you know, that, the only comment I want to make is public speaking is not easy for anyone, but I'm more than welcome to stay here and talk to anyone face to face, obviously 6 feet apart, and answer any questions or listen to your input personally. So if you'd like to let me know, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, and again, I'm sorry, the motion is to postpone until a date determined by both parties. Because I'm sure that the question will be, well, when are you going to make a decision? We don't know that right now. We've taken your input, we've got your questions, we're going to put together the frequently asked questions. We're going to have some discussions both internally and with the township. So I can't give you a date. So hopefully the media isn't going to ask me that tonight. But that's a motion on the table. If you'll call the roll.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess before I turn it over and trade back and forth with Mike, that was our only topic this evening, so we may as well adjourn before I.
At this point now, I'll entertain a motion to table this topic to a date to be determined. We have a motion on the table, supported by trustee Kroll. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Clerk Flavich, yes. Trustee Kroll,
Yeah.
trustee Gunkel, trustee Holman,
Yeah.
trustee Lappin, supervisor Skibby.
Yes. At this point in time, I'll also entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. We have a motion on the table by trustee Foley and supported by trustee Dunkel. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say- Meeting adjourned.
That's fine.
Awesome.